Welcome to this video. Thank you so much for tuning in and sharing in this now moment with myself and with one another. I just want to start off by giving a little gratitude, a little shout out to anyone watching and listening to this right now. I've been doing these videos for a few years now, and there's been so many times that I've just almost decided to move on and maybe do something different or stop being on social media. And I think a lot of us have felt that way at times. And I wanted to say thank you to everyone who has watched these videos, who will be watching these videos. I know I'm not always the best at responding to comments. And I want to address that a little bit because that's one of the messages that's been coming through from my team to yours. So having said that gratitude, I do appreciate everyone who has shared these videos and felt like they've gotten something from what I've had to share, hopefully positive. This is not something, there's a lot of social media platforms out there. I had a little bit of a hiccup. I think once I spoke about the big, I think I spoke about the Amazonian rainforest once when we were having all those fires. And I got, what's it called when you get shadow banned back then? And it's never quite recovered. I've always been a little bit on the shadow ban wagon. And it's okay. It is what it is. The reason I'm bringing this up is there's moments we have that we can feel discouraged. We feel like people may not hear what we have to say. We feel like we may not be doing enough. And I just wanted to take a moment and say that is not true from one perspective. Granted, if you're just laying around the house feeling sorry for yourself, eating bonbons, worrying about the state of the world, that might be a different scenario. But most of us are doing something, and that's enough. And I really feel called to share that because we can get really down on ourselves for feeling like we're not on our path, we're not on our mission, we should be having a bigger impact, we should have more people on our channel, we should be starting a non-for-profit, and all we are doing is fill in the blanks, whatever that might be. But what I continuously shown over and over again by my guides is how much of a ripple effect we have on each other and on the collective, more so than we will ever realize in this lifetime. So just as something as simple as telling someone that you care about them, or saying thank you, or giving someone a hug, or maybe helping someone out to their car who might have too many bags, helping someone find their car in the parking lot, all kinds of little things. They really do add up, and they really do have such an impact on our everyday reality. One of the messages that's been coming through is take the little things. It's one day at a time. It's 1 hour at a time. This, for me, the full moon's been quite a doozy. I've been processing a lot and integrating a lot of emotions and other things, not just the full moon. And it can be challenging at times to not feel overwhelmed by the weight of fill in the blanks, the world, family issues, health issues, work issues, so on and so forth. And from my perspective, I started this channel not only for my own creative reasons and the need to share what I was experiencing, but in part because I felt very alone and isolated in what I was experiencing. I wasn't necessarily receiving the response that, and I really don't know what I was hoping for in the beginning. I think I was excited about what was coming through. Let's use the light language as an example. And I didn't quite get the response from my friends and family, partner, whatever, that I would have hoped for. And at the time, and I could have fallen into a space of, and I did fall into a space of self-doubt and feeling like what I was doing wasn't necessarily helpful, so on and so forth. Whatever the stories are that we tell ourselves to diminish our light because we feel like we need to be doing more, or we feel like we need someone to validate our experience to make it more real. Because what we're dealing with in this type of, we could call it reality, dealing with magic. It's not magic, it's science, but it seems like magic when we're speaking light language, or when we're doing energy work and somebody sees colors, or when we do a reading for someone and a loved one who's passed on comes in, so on and so forth. And these are examples of things that I've been experiencing over the years. And we want that magic. And then when we get it, we really look around and say, okay, did you see that? It's like seeing a flying saucer, pointing at it, and everybody going, what are you talking about? There's nothing up there, even though it's right over their heads. And you're seeing it, but they're not. And I'm getting goosebumps right now because I think this video is really meant to be made with the intention of reminding everybody that it's okay to be where you're at, wherever that is. And it's okay if people don't get that. They may never get it. And really letting go of the expectation that others are going to get our journey. Because it might get easier. It has gotten easier for me. People start to realize, oh, I guess this is going to stick. She's going to keep speaking light language. It's not just a phase. And so they begin to sometimes accept us for who we are or who we are no longer. That can be challenging too, because sometimes we go through these massive changes and we want our friends and family to come along with us. But part of that, if we want to call it a lesson, I hesitate to call it a lesson because I don't think everything is a lesson. And not everything, it can be a learning experience. We call it a learning experience. Part of that is recognizing that that person that we want to be on the journey with us is on their own journey. Where are we expecting them to do things a certain way that we don't agree with? And that's a reflection back at us when we're on our journey and we want people to really embrace us, yet they're not able to, or they're unwilling to, or whatever it might be. We have to come to, or I'm speaking from my own personal experience, acceptance of that. And in that, we find acceptance of ourselves. And I wanted to share this because this is an ongoing journey and potentially an ongoing struggle for a lot of people. Not always. It's a struggle when we're in resistance to that acceptance. It's a struggle when we're in resistance to some area or part of our lives. So that was part of the messages that were coming through this week. The other messages that were coming through this week had to do with keep going, one foot in front of the other. It's going to look different on certain days. It's not always going to look sunshine and rainbows. Sometimes it's going to feel a little foggy, a little rainy. And even though someone in our lives may not fully understand us or appreciate us or accept everything about us, sometimes it's just those little moments of acceptance and appreciation that balance it out, that help us. It's like breadcrumbs, right? We get those little breadcrumbs and it's like, okay, at least I have that. And you guys fill in the blanks wherever this works for you. It could be that you want a promotion at work and your spouse doesn't think that you are going to get it. Or you want a promotion at work and your coworker or colleague feels that you don't deserve it, even though you know you do, or you feel you do. I could go on and on. There's story after story after story. Perhaps you're a parent and your child doesn't feel like you're doing a good enough job. But we want validation from that child to feel like we're doing a good job. We may not get it ever, or it might be, as I tell some of my friends who have got young teenagers, give it a few years. I appreciated my parents in my 30s more so than I did in my teenage years. So our relationships change as we mature. That's a perfect example. Our relationships change as we have experiences and we grow from those experiences. And sometimes the difficult things that we go through, such as not being accepted or feeling like an outcast or feeling like nobody gets us, is part of the experience that we're having so that we can come to wholeness and oneness in ourselves. But recognizing that along the journey, we do have support. Sometimes we're just in a space of such resistance that we're unable to see that support from any angle. Sometimes we don't have it, and it requires us to go deeper, or it requires us to branch out more. And so that's another subject that's been coming up. For some of us, we go into hermit mode. And by the way, me starting this YouTube channel was where I started this platform, was one of the most difficult things I've ever done. Yet it was so freeing when I did it. And yet it was so difficult. I'm going to talk about that just for a minute. So sometimes we have to expand out, like putting ourselves on social media, getting out of our comfort zone. Other times it's not about that. It is about us going within. It is about us reflecting. And it is about us not sharing our experiences, because we might be in a vulnerable place that if we share those experiences and we don't get the response that we're hoping for, it can shut us down. So that's something, when we know that, we know ourselves, we start to understand that about ourselves, we kind of have an idea of the timing of these things. So we're being called to ask ourselves, where am I at? If I'm looking for validation, I'm looking for support, and I'm expecting to get that, and then I don't get it, is that going to keep me from moving forward? Is that going to keep me from expansion? And if so, why? And if so, what can I do to work through that? Sometimes it requires us doing a creative project so that we can at least put something that we feel creative and expansive about to action, to practice, to tactile, to bring into this reality. It doesn't always have to be that we have to go on social media and start speaking light language. It could be working, in an environment. It could be working with animals, going and volunteering at a horse farm or a shelter. It could be working with other people in just having that human or living, doesn't have to be human if it's animals, interaction to take us out of our head, to get us to also get out of our shell and to give love and receive love from another being. Sometimes that's all we really need. And letting go of our expectations about what that looks like as well has been something else that's been coming up. Because sometimes that needs to be enough. And the next day, 24 hours later, we might feel completely different about it and go, oh, what was I worried about? What was I so upset about? Because we were working through something. We were in it, as I like to call it. Give it time. Be patient with ourselves. I remember years ago when I started this channel, actually it was after I'd started this channel, I'd been doing this work for a while. I just want to back up for a moment, because when I say I'm doing this work, I don't just do videos, right? I'm actually doing healing work. I do channeling. I connect with loved ones that have passed on. I do coaching. Some of it's in person, some of it's through Zoom and internet. I have a spouse and a family that I have relationships with, and friendships that I try to keep going and in touch with, although sometimes I hermit myself around those as well. But my point is, we can do what we can do. Sometimes one of the things that's come up for me this week is overwhelm. I need to be doing more. I need to have a bigger impact. I'm not reaching enough people. Maybe I'm not reaching enough people because my messages are so weird. They're not for everyone. Sometimes we get caught up in that, and that can pull us into a place of deeper self-reflection, which we might need. And sometimes it can pull us into scattered, too many things going on all at once. And some of that is about letting go of our expectations of ourselves and what other people have around us. This takes work. These videos are not something that are, it's easy to pop on and speak, but I don't always have time. And sometimes I will start doing a video and I realize, oh, I don't know where I was going with that, and I have to start all over again. I started doing recordings and I've been putting them on my website. So if you guys are interested in downloading some light language recordings, they're about 5 minutes long. Basic light language, I'm going to be adding a lot more of those to my website if you feel called, because I've done so much work for free over the years that it's time to start adding to my own value. And that's another message that's been coming up. So I wanted to kind of I'm on like 5 tangents right now. So let me try to stay somewhat organized. Sometimes people expect us to do things for free. And you guys, most of you, many of you out there do probably do a lot of things for free. I do healing work and energy work and sessions all the time for free. However, you still have to pay the bills and put food on the table. And so I'm sharing this because I think there's a little bit of an issue in the lightworker community about money and abundance. And I've gone through it before. I felt like I can monetize this channel, and very often I don't monetize. I just don't choose to. But why? I had someone the other day say, why don't you just start putting commercials on? Because they're annoying. But I do have a couple videos that have commercials, but I still haven't seen anything come in from that, and that's okay. I was experimenting. And that's the other message that's coming through. So let me just go backwards. Value. Give it a shot, try and see how you feel about it. Letting go of expectations. And not putting so much on ourselves so we're spread so thin that we're not able to focus on ourselves. There's a lot of subjects. This has all been coming up for me this week, you guys. Not only in sessions, but for me personally. You guys, this is a constant state of expansion and expression and understanding and expanding and expressing and understanding and coming back into these and activations and downloads and uploads. It can be a lot. It can be overwhelming. We have to take that time to regroup and recenter, because if we don't, we are even more easily discouraged. We are even more easily we feel less value in ourselves. We feel there's just so many things that come up when we don't actually practice self-care. So that was another subject. Let me go back to, which one of those should I kind of address? I'm going to go back to the story about years ago when I started. I posted a poem, I think, on social media, and it was just, I was feeling really down. World had a lot of bad things going on, and it still does. I'm very aware of that. And I made a choice. I went down the rabbit hole. This is where I'm going to start. Let's start with the rabbit hole. I fell down the rabbit hole and I got stuck. And there were a lot of tunnels that I could go into. When you do this kind of work, you meet a lot of people who don't necessarily, and ourselves included sometimes, hold responsibility or accountability for themselves. They tend to blame things. And that's another subject that's been coming up. So I might have to do separate videos on all these subjects. This has all come up this week. So I've been busy kind of integrating a lot of this, which is another thing. It's not just about work and it's not just about family. It's about us integrating our own stuff so that we can come back out into the world and share what we've learned. Anyways, so I wrote this poem because I was feeling really sad, and I had fallen down the rabbit hole, and it was not fun. It was exciting. Let me just go back. When we go down certain rabbit holes, it can be exciting because we're learning. That's what we feel like we're doing. We're learning and we're gaining perspective, and we're learning about the truth that maybe has been hidden from us. And yet on the flip side, sometimes ignorance is bliss, but not necessarily because of why we think it is. Because when we're in a space of not really knowing what's going on and we think everything is good and we're just going through our lives and doing things that make us happy and planting a garden and hanging out with our grandparents and maybe going to the park with our kids and having a nice dinner with our husband, that's actually very high vibrational. And you may not know what's going on in the other realms, but that's the life that some people have chosen to live. And wow, that sounds pretty nice, doesn't it? Ironically, I fell down that hole so I could get back to that place because I was unable to balance the two for a little while. And some of you out there, I think, can relate, maybe had some differences of opinions with friends who were living in their bubble. And you're like, how can you be living in this bubble? Look at what's going on. Now I've come back full circle and I'm in all of the bubbles. And I'm doing the best I can with what I know I have the ability to do. I had somebody that, so I posted this poem of like positivity, and this person who was in another country just blasted me. How could you? We're going through so much right now. You're in this country where you can make a difference and you could go save these children. I'm using that as an example, as one of the rabbit holes. And you're right there. And it really threw me for a loop. I had never been blasted that way before. And by the way, a couple things I've learned. I don't interact much on social media because I realize that those interactions can really pull us off track sometimes. And not only that, not all of the interactions are necessarily positive or negative. They just are. And I realized that I spent a lot of time kind of trying to make it right for that other person. And this was another message that's coming through. This goes back a little bit to validation and expectations. That may never work. And that's not necessarily why we're here. We are not here to make everybody else agree with us or to make everyone else happy. So I'm going back to that experience. It was a very valuable experience because it actually, I was upset for a while. And then I had the realization that, this person, gosh, they were in it. They were feeling the angst of everything that was going on. And maybe they just had a Kundalini awakening and, But ultimately, me getting into a conversation with this person was not going to go anywhere because that person really believed they were right and I was wrong. And when you're dealing with someone that's in that tunnel vision, there is no other tunnel because that's their focus. And the energy around that particular, the energy around that particular person, but around that frequency is chaos. It's a tornado, and not necessarily in a good way. It's difficult to, and that's their experience. What I learned is that's their experience. From their perspective, I should be doing more. And it made me feel like I should be doing more. Well, should I go volunteer? Should I do this? What? But then I realized that sometimes it's not about that. In fact, now I'm recognizing it's not about that at all. Because we didn't all come here to do the same job. If we were all builders, then who would organize the city? And if we were all organizers, then who would build? And then if something happened, who would take care of the builder that might have injured themselves on the job? Well, then we should all be doctors, so we could all help everybody. But if we're all doctors, then it's an ecosystem. And while it may seem that this ecosystem is a mess, and it's being run very improperly, it's still an ecosystem, and we're still part of it. And we are still each an individual cell within the human ecosystem that came here to do what we came here to do. And that's going to be different for everyone. And this comes back to us allowing ourselves to be that. And the other message is that might change. Yes, at some time, maybe that person was involved with rescuing whatever. But that might shift for them and they may decide to get involved in farming. They might decide eventually that it's time for them to get married and enjoy their life and have kids. There's a different opportunity for each and every one of us at different points in our lives. It's not always going to look the same. And there are going to be people out there that can't see that have these expectations of us. And it's helpful when that happens for us to look and say, well, where do I fit into this? What are my expectations of myself? Am I doing something that really makes me happy? And when we do things that make us happy, and I'm not talking about in a selfish way, I'm talking about, and I've done videos on this before, so I don't want to go into it too much, but I'm not talking about murder. There are people that do things to make people happy because that's what makes them happy, but then they're really not happy unless they are feeling like they're needed. And that's another whole other bubble, right? But I've recognized that that's not why I'm here. And I don't necessarily have to interact with that person. It's not that I don't have compassion for what they're feeling, which is another subject that came up. I did a video of this, but a week or so ago, somebody's saying, well, I don't believe we should have compassion for everybody. Well, your definition of compassion is different than my definition of compassion. And that's another subject, because just because someone has an idea of what we should look like, what we should act like, what we should do, it has nothing to do with us. Although social media would make us think otherwise. So we're being called to ask ourselves, how much pressure are we putting on ourselves to be something or someone according to the ideology that maybe social media is creating, or whatever it might be, another person that we admire, so on and so forth. So I realized that we can all get stuck in these ideas of who and what we should be doing and looking like according to our own, it's really on us, our own insecurities. You know, am I doing enough? Well, are you? Because in that moment, you might feel like this is all I can handle. And if that's all you can handle, I'm using this as an example because I've been there, then yes. Because if you do more and you fall apart, then who are you helping? No one. So these are all things to keep in mind. The other thing, and this is just, again, I'm just expressing my own journey. A lot of us are doing a lot. It may not look like that. And I'm going to bring it back to social media. I'm picking a little bit on social media, but I see it. You know, we have a tendency to think that everybody out there is doing so much, and I do it too. I'm like, how this person's got a podcast and they've got this. I've been talking about doing a podcast for 4 years and I have yet to actually make it happen. But at the same time, is that necessary for me to be happy? Or is that something I feel like I have to do because everybody else is doing it, or because I said I would do it? And that is important to follow through with what we say we're going to do. That's another subject. But also recognizing the timing in it and recognizing when we're ready. And sometimes the resistance that we feel may be because we're not ready. It may be because we've got too many other things going on. It might be because it's time to actually receive some of the downloads and integrate those before we go on to the next project, and so on and so forth. So I kind of covered a lot of topics. I hope that you guys get what I'm putting down here. And I might do some more videos like this down the road. But overall, a lot's coming up for a lot of us, and we're each in our own individual experience, trying to just go and interact with other humans going through their own stuff. So really stepping away from what others think is important. And on the flip side though, when we feel appreciated, or when we can appreciate someone else, that's really valuable right now. in general, it's really valuable to help someone else feel valued. That doesn't mean to be inauthentic about it, but sometimes it's important to really go out of our way to tell someone that they're important to us, to our journey, to our experience, that they have value. And it's equally important, if no one's telling us that, to tell ourselves that and to do certain things that represent that. I do have value. This is important. And if it's important enough for me to share it, maybe someone else will get something from it. That in itself can be valued, valuable. It doesn't have to be associated with money, but I'm going to kind of end on that note. There tends to be extremes in the communities about money. It's hard to find that balance, you guys, from my perspective. But we'll each find our balance accordingly. Some people have no problem with it. Other people do. I kind of oscillate in the middle, you know. I'll go and do all of these free readings, and then I go, okay, I gotta get back on track, because that was, 5 hours of my time in addition to the videos, in addition to this. So you have to find that balance to where you start to value what it is that you're spending time on. Now, for me, that example, I value it because I always gain something from those experiences, but I also recognize there has to be a balance. So I think that I'll end on that note, is balancing it all out. And it kind of ties back to my original message, that if we don't feel like we're doing enough, that in itself can create an imbalance in our ecosystem. We start to feel out of balance because we're projecting ourselves into what we should be doing instead of being present with what is. And in that moment is when we gain the perspective, when we gain the value, and we actually enhance and upgrade. And that opens our doors for more. And then instead of pushing things away, we just kind of realize that some things don't need to be pushed away. They'll just dissolve. Other things will be brought to us. And we just continue to do the work, however that looks for each individual person, as best we can, moment to moment throughout the day. So I hope everyone is enjoying their week, and just feeling a lot of emotions coming up about life in general. So hopefully someone listening found this valuable. And in the meantime, until the next video, in love and light, guys, namaste.